Minnesota is a state located in the northern region of the United States, sharing its borders with Canada to the north and east, as well as with several other U.S. states: Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. Its capital city is St. Paul, but the largest city in the state is Minneapolis. These two cities are often referred to as the Twin Cities, serving as the political, economic, and cultural hub of the region. Together, they form the 16th largest metropolitan area in the United States. Over 60% of Minnesota's population, which totals approximately 5.7 million people, resides within this metropolitan area. Known as the land of 10,000 lakes, Minnesota is home to more than 11,000 freshwater bodies. Among these, the largest is Lake Superior, a natural wonder shared with neighboring states. Remarkably, this state is also the birthplace of the Mississippi River, the third longest river in the world. In terms of its people and quality of life, Minnesota consistently ranks among the top states in the nation. It holds the 4th position for overall quality of life, has the 3rd lowest poverty rate, tied with Colorado, the 2nd lowest unemployment rate, and is recognized for its long life expectancy and ranking 3rd in human development. Adding to its appeal, Minnesota is home to the famous Mall of America, the largest shopping center in the United States, located in Bloomington. Despite these achievements, Minnesota faces significant challenges. Beyond its iconic landmarks, such as the Aerial Lift Bridge and the picturesque Tetagouche State Park, the state struggles with a persistent issue of homelessness. According to the Minnesota Homeless Study conducted by the Wilder Foundation in 2023, an estimated 10,522 Minnesotans were experiencing homelessness. While this figure marks a 7% decrease from the record high in 2018, it still represents the 2nd highest count since 1991. Approximately 1/3 of those experiencing homelessness in Minnesota live outside formal shelters. While families continue to make up nearly half of the homeless population, there has been a noticeable increase in the number of adults experiencing homelessness compared to 2018, even as the number of children has decreased. About 1/3 of Minnesota's homeless population resides in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan area. Ironically, in this affluent urban center, many endure long-term homelessness and are forced to move frequently in search of stability. The lack of affordable housing remains one of the primary reasons for the growing number of people living on the streets in Minnesota. For example, the average rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in the Twin Cities area of Minneapolis, St. Paul, is $745 per month. While in the broader Minnesota metropolitan area, the average rent is $531 per month. In contrast, the average monthly income for a homeless adult is only $381 in the Twin Cities and $403 in the larger metropolitan area, highlighting a significant affordability gap that leaves many unable to secure stable housing. Long-term homelessness often leads to a host of other challenges, including health complications, depression, exposure to violence, and substance abuse disorders. Tragically, the mortality rate among the homeless population is 3 times higher than that of the general population. For certain groups, the statistics are even more alarming. Native Americans and African Americans experiencing homelessness face mortality rates 5 times higher than the national average. Furthermore, 6 out of 10 adults experiencing long-term homelessness suffer from serious mental health conditions, and about half have physical or mental impairments that limit the type or amount of work they can perform. Substance abuse, particularly the rising use of fentanyl, poses another significant problem in Minnesota. The fentanyl crisis has swept through much of the state, with users openly consuming various drugs in public spaces. It is not uncommon to see individuals using and distributing narcotics in streets, parks, and homeless encampments. While Minnesota ranks among the 10 states with the lowest overall drug use, the number of overdose deaths remains deeply concerning. The emergence of fentanyl, a synthetic opioid 50 times stronger than heroin, has fueled a nationwide crisis, claiming the lives of more than 100,000 people in 2022 alone. In Minnesota, overdose deaths surged by 43% between 2020 and 2022. In 2021, there were 978 overdose deaths, and this number exceeded 1,000 in 2022. Beyond the emotional and social toll, substance abuse has significant financial consequences. According to the Minnesota Department of Health, excessive alcohol consumption alone cost the state's residents $7.85 billion in 2019. This figure includes losses in productivity, healthcare expenses, and other costs associated with the judicial system and accidents. On average, this equates to $1,383 per Minnesota resident, underscoring the enormous economic burden of substance abuse on the state. The drug crisis in Minnesota is further complicated by the stark racial disparities in overdose deaths. Native American Indian residents are dying at more than 9 times the rate of white residents, while African Americans, or those of African descent, are over 3 times more likely to succumb to overdoses. Adding to the challenge, 1 in 5 overdose deaths since 2015 has involved individuals who were released from correctional facilities within the past year, revealing gaps in post-incarceration support and addiction recovery resources. In recent years, Minnesota has also been grappling with significant security challenges. Despite its serene natural landscapes, the state faces complex urban crime issues. Minneapolis, its largest city, holds the highest crime rate in the state, with violent crime rates at 337% above the state average. This translates to 1,226 incidents per 100,000 residents, a stark contrast to the broader Minnesota average. Minneapolis continues to battle alarming rates of assault, with 709 reported cases, along with 409 robberies, 78 rapes, and 19 homicides. A substantial portion of these crimes is attributed to organized criminal gangs. Among the most concerning is the Felony Lane Gang, a nationwide network operating across almost the entire United States. Based in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, this group is notorious for recruiting drug addicts to commit theft, robbery, and identity fraud. In Minnesota, their primary targets are vehicles parked by women, stealing purses containing checkbooks and identification cards. They then enlist women to impersonate the victims and cash stolen checks at bank drive-thrus. Bemidji, a northern Minnesota community with a population of around 15,000, holds the unfortunate distinction of having the highest property crime rate in the state. Known as the first city on the Mississippi, Bemidji prides itself as the birthplace of the legendary Paul Bunyan and is home to iconic statues of the folk hero and his companion, Babe the Blue Ox. While it is a popular tourist destination, this very status contributes to its elevated property crime rate. Additionally, street prostitution is a visible issue in parts of the city, with many individuals involved being victims of human trafficking and organized criminal networks. Human trafficking, a modern form of slavery where perpetrators force victims into labor or sexual exploitation, is a rapidly growing issue across the United States, including in Minnesota. In its street-level manifestation as prostitution, this troubling phenomenon is particularly prevalent in North Minneapolis. It is largely concentrated around major streets like West Broadway, Penn, Lowry, Emerson, and Lyndale Avenues, along with the smaller connecting roads in the area. Driving through these neighborhoods, one may encounter workers in revealing clothing approaching passing vehicles. Some of them are visibly under the influence of drugs. However, not all of these individuals are acting of their own free will or even fully understand the circumstances they are trapped in. Many of them are victims of an underground industry often linked to criminal organizations. Those with a background of homelessness, who are disconnected from family or other support systems, are particularly vulnerable to being exploited. A study conducted by the organization Garden of Truth sheds light on the harsh realities of this issue. By interviewing 150 homeless women involved in prostitution, the study revealed that half of them met the conservative legal definition of sex trafficking, which includes third-party control by pimps or traffickers. The findings are deeply disturbing. 79% of these women had been sexually abused as children, 92% had been raped, 84% had suffered physical assault while engaged in prostitution, and 72% had experienced traumatic brain injuries as a result of their circumstances. Unfortunately, these statistics do not capture the full scale of the problem. Many instances of prostitution and human trafficking go unreported or are not prosecuted. Even when arrests or prosecutions occur, the trauma inflicted on the victims often remains unresolved. Survivors frequently endure ongoing fear, insecurity, and lasting mental and emotional damage long after their exploitation has ended. Perhaps most distressing is the realization that there is no singular profile of a human trafficking victim. Those most often exploited typically come from marginalized or vulnerable communities. Poverty, homelessness, addiction, and a lack of access to education or employment create conditions that traffickers exploit, preying on individuals with limited options for escape or support.